What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Shiny McForeheadstein. Over here at HQ I've been trying to make volcanic rounds firepower based pyromancer work for a hot minute. Now, all jokes aside, it is a build that has haunted me since I started playing this game and making content for it. Firepower volcanic rounds pyromancer, that's a real mouthful, has never really felt really strong and consistent. And I would say that now with New Horizons patch coming out and dropping the time requirement from expeditions, as well as the meta kind of like shifting towards a more support orientated, basis where people start, fleshing their builds out to give a little bit more assistance to their teammates to do more damage overall. This build right now is in a fantastic place and I can't wait to share it with you. So definitely hold on to your seats because this shit's gonna get hot. But if you enjoyed this video, if you found it useful in any way, please do consider giving it a like, subbing to the channel, maybe sharing the video with a buddy. It really does help the channel grow a lot. And besides that, it just means a lot to an old bruh like me. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. Now, first things first, let me give credit where credit's due. What led me down the rabbit hole that eventually resulted in this build that I'm going to share with you guys today is a post on one of my previous videos, a comment from Ocean's Home saying, my friend and I made a pyro. Borealis said legs, gloves, boots on a pyro with thermal, feed the flames and volcanic rounds. Must have mods are branded and double fun, as well as feed flames, increase distance, and the mod to allow multiple targets. Rock Damascus offering with freeze and claymore. It absolutely claps. Your teammates will love you too. Now that kind of like sounded like a little bit crazy, and then I started pulling the pieces together. I started thinking which mods to stack in. I started thinking what the skill tree would look like, and it just started making more and more sense. And as I basically got the pieces together and started running this, and that's of course the footage that you're seeing in the background right now, this really does fucking slap. There's a couple of reasons why this works so well. So first of all, you're stacking two elements onto enemies. So you're stacking freeze onto it, and Borealis lets you do all this additional damage to freeze. Things like claymore from your weapon and all of your other damage is further on basically increased by this 90%. But the other thing is you're also stacking the additional effect of damage coming from volcanic rounds on there, as well as the fact that you're throwing out these massive thermal bombs which brand targets, which make them take 40% more damage. You're throwing out multiples of these, so you're ramping up your own and your teammates damage as well. And it's exceptionally good at taking down a lot of stuff at once, like a lot of AoE damage, and then at the same time being really good at focusing something down by dumping two thermal bombs on it and then just raining damage on it. Now, feed the flames in this case here, and it wasn't explicitly explained in the post there, but this doesn't have a natural mechanic for reloading your weapons. So feed the flames does actually allow for that, and the certain mods that you stack on there can allow you to essentially keep your gun up the entire time, especially because you're using an LMG. So you really never lose your volcanic rounds, and volcanic rounds really does shine a lot when it comes to essentially just keeping everything on fire the whole time and feeding additional life into yourself with skills life leech. Now, one other thing which is phenomenal about this is if you spec correctly in the skill tree, you're actually able to select something that says that everything that gets set on fire immediately after that effect ends, they turn to ash. So there's also a lot of innate CC built into this. Remember, from your gun you're freezing stuff, right? But that's usually on one target unless you're spraying and you're basically hitting everything. But remember, you're also hitting stuff with thermal bombs, and the thermal bombs basically make an AoE explosion, and all of those set everything around them on fire. Plus you're using feed the flames, which pulls from multiple targets, so those are also getting set on fire. And all of those things, if they survive that, they turn to ash, which again triggers a further damage phase for you because you're also dealing additional damage to ash. Plus the CC that comes from that, which allows your teammates to move around freely and not be pressured by enemies. So it really is a plus kind of situation, and just a fantastic utility build that you can play with this. Plus finally being able to use volcanic rounds in a pyro and having it feel good and powerful and strong. Now, one other little side note that I do want to make, is you might have picked it up in the footage that you've been seeing in the background, is this is after all a firepower pyromancer though, so you are stacking firepower, and some of the mods that you're stacking are stacking additional firepower on as you kill stuff, but also as you aim down the sight. However, Claymore has a weird proccing mechanic where if you're constantly just shooting down the sights, then it seems to not always proc on the right time that it's supposed to proc. However, if you feather looking down the sights and backing to hip, and looking down the sights and backing to hip, a weird thing happens where sometimes you'll get double procs of Claymore, where it literally drops two right after each other, or it drops Claymore on multiple enemies around the one that you're hitting. So I definitely think this isn't correct behavior, and it's not supposed to work that way, but I'm not going to complain because it's a shitload of additional damage, and it is something that you kind of like have to get used to. So don't get locked into always aiming down sights and shooting with this, but rather feather the trigger, as I said, and don't be, you know, don't be scared with backing out of a fight and just going to hip fire and just basically spraying and praying, because that's going to drop a whole bunch of claymores and stuff and set a whole bunch of shit on fire. So it plays a little bit differently, but once you get used to that whole thing, it is such a rewarding thing to just see all these claymores drop. The claymores are doing insane damage to things that have branded on them, and it just works really well. Getting to the build itself, firstly looking as weapons as usual. As mentioned, you have to use the Damascus offering, because the Damascus offering has claymore on it innately. It is an LMG, and it's also got status power on. And as we discussed the mods on the armor, I'll also explain why status power is a great substat for you to sort of pump here. Then you want to go ahead and replace the second mod on Damascus offering with ultimate freezing bullets. That is the main thing that allows you to obviously the main and the only thing that allows you to introduce freeze to the enemies that you're shooting, but it's on a 1 second cooldown, so no problem. You're shooting an LMG which fills the air with bullets, so you're going to be able to freeze like a whole bunch of stuff. Once you freeze something, you get the 90% additional damage that you get from Borealis, and you know, that's basically all she wrote. The damage will just roll off of that. I was super lucky. I have a perfectly rolled Damascus offering here, but don't let that dissuade you. Anything from an 85 and up, 88 and up will still look quite spectacular in terms of the damage that it pushes out. Now, your secondary weapon in your pistol is not important at all, because again, you want to be having volcanic rounds up as much or the entire time if possible, so you won't be switching weapons. So it really doesn't matter. You can throw any old thing in there, just as long as it's CT 15 or level 50, so that you don't suffer any stat penalty for it. Now, when we go over to the armor itself, we're doing 3-piece Borealis here, and the 3 pieces of Borealis that you're using is legs, gloves, and boots. So that means that you need 2 purple items on here. And let's first talk about stat distribution. Now, this is a firepower build, and as you can see, it's not as if I don't have a lot of firepower. It's quite a bit. 162. It's not as good as like a Firepower Techno, which usually peaks at about 210 before buffs and stuff get installed on it. But the point is, with the mods that we're having, we can ramp this 162 all the way up to 350, 420, something like that. So it's not as if your bullets aren't going to be doing a lot of damage. This is definitely not comparable in terms of like point damage or critical damage to a Firepower Techno. Or blighted rounds Techno rather, but the point is you offer far more utility and assistance to your teammates to do damage with like the likes of Branded, for instance. That's really where this build shines. So it really is a true support class, but just able to also deal a whole bunch of damage. That's what I like about this build, is because you can totally play it solo, and I've been playing it solo a whole lot, but it just becomes this great support class once you play with buddies. And as you know, Ocean's Home said, your friends will really love you when they start seeing those big damage numbers rolling in from stuff getting like 2 sets of Branded on them or something like that. Now, when we look at sorry, to get back to the substats, because I went down a rabbit hole there, but we want to be stacking bonus firepower, and we definitely want cooldown reduction. The reason why cooldown reduction is important is because we want as much access to thermal bombs and to Feed the Flames as possible. Feed the Flames is our reload mechanic for our volcanic rounds to stay up the entire time. Plus, it's the main way that we heal ourselves if we're in shit. So that's our oh shit button as well, in case we take too much damage. And of course, thermal bomb is a great way for us to not only CC enemies, but essentially burst down captains, elites, bosses, anything like that. On here, I have Branded, which is the main debuffer of this, and it's also, obviously, those of you that play debuff Pyro will recognize Branded, the skill, or the mod rather. It is super important and super fucking OP, because you can stack it multiple times on an enemy. So if something has 2 stacks of Branded on it, it takes 80% additional damage, and so on and so forth. My second mod on here is Bloodlust. Now, Bloodlust says that killing shots increase my firepower by 17,505. Now, one thing to bear in mind here, unless you're cognizant of firing the whole time and using your bullets to kill stuff, this won't proc. because you have to kill something with your weapon. You can kill something with volcanic rounds, and the volcanic rounds burn actually kills it. That doesn't count and doesn't proc this. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, in that case, this kind of seems like it's a dead mod, but you'd be surprised how many times when you set a whole bunch of stuff on fire or a thermal bomb goes off, stuff burns to almost within 1 or 2 or 3 shot kill, and then you can just mouse over them and tap them, and boom, suddenly your firepower jumps through the roof. So I don't necessarily think it's dead, but you know, some might disagree, and I'm of course welcome to suggestions of something else to stick in there. However, I think this works really well. As I've mentioned, status power is quite important, because status power not only determines how long things stay frozen, but it also determines how long your burn lasts on something. Now, your burn is a certain percentage of your AP. This does not have high AP, and I've tried 2 different versions of this. I went completely firepower focused, and I went completely AP focused. The problem is the Borealis pieces that you're using in this build all have firepower on them, so you lose access to a whole bunch of additional AP that you would be getting from just using other pieces. If you were to use other pieces and not use Borealis, then you don't get the 90% additional damage to frozen stuff, so it kind of breaks the whole build. So firepower seems to be the better fit for this. However, I think that there is probably a world where you could build something like this, maybe sacrifice a little bit of the utility and the solo clearing speed, but you go full AP, and that just means that your burns deal a whole bunch of damage. Maybe, I don't know. I however think this is superior in damage profile. When we go over to the chest, here we have bullet absorption. So this is our reload mechanic. This replenishes 40% of ammo on your magazine for every enemy affected by the skill. Now, here's the thing. This LMG that you're using, the Claymore, not the Claymore, I mean, it's called the Damascus Offering, has 100 bullets in the mag. So if you hit even just one enemy with Feed the Flames, you get 40% of 100 back, right? So the point is, because of us, how we spec Feed the Flames, we are actually pulling from 3 enemies at once. So every time when you do Feed the Flames, no matter how empty your mag is, you're back up to 100. As long as there's 3 enemies. If there's 2, you get 80% back, which is still almost a full mag. So this is fantastic, and if you're cognizant of this and play around it, you will never, ever lose bullets. Then the second ability on here, or rather mod, I keep calling them abilities and skills, I really need to work on that, but is double fun. Now this means that every time when you press thermal bomb, instead of shooting out one little line and attaching it to someone, it shoots out 2. So this just, you know, doubles up the fun. Now what you have to remember though is if there's one enemy, pressing it once doesn't mean that all 2 go into one. Then it will just shoot 1. So there has to be 2 targets, and it'll split up. It'll always split up, it'll never double stack. But what we do have is we have access to 2 thermal bombs. So then you can go thermal bomb, gloop, it sticks, thermal bomb, and it sticks. Or if there's multiple enemies, you can go thermal bomb, and it'll go 2-2, and then you've got 4 enemies affected. Then when we go over to the legs, we've got the first piece of Borealis here. Now the Borealis pieces are stacked with bonus firepower, status power, and long range damage, which really also means that this build works better the further away you are from enemies and the further away you keep them from you. You'll notice your damage ramps up considerably, plus it's also a very comfortable range from which to fight the enemies and not get into any trouble. On here we have Nova. This increases the skills range by 100%. That means that Feed the Flames essentially can reach all the way to the back. It has about the same reach as Overheat, if you want to have, you know, a comparison there. So this means that this can reach incredibly far, and again, this just makes it really good at being able to pull ammo out of enemies from far away. Plus, remember, once you hit them with a Feed the Flames, they burn, and then as soon as they finish burning, they turn to ash. So this is a great way for you to CC stuff at a far range as well. Then I have Freezing Boost on here, which comes by default on the Borealis. So here you'll now see the stacking effect that we apply to stuff that's frozen. So as soon as you hit them with your gun, they freeze, then you get all this additional percentages of extra damage. You get 90% from Borealis, and then you get another 15% from Freezing Boost. Plus, we also still have Shatter down here, which gives another 25%. So that's just ridiculous. That is an insane ramp up of damage. Then if we go to the gloves, as I've mentioned, we've got Shatter, and then we've got Fire Frenzy. Fire Frenzy is what I was referring to just now. It means that you have 2 applications of Thermal Bomb available before the skill goes on cooldown. And last but not least, we've got Sharp Eye, which is the brother mod to Bloodlust. Both of them kind of work the same way in ramping up your firepower. The only difference is Sharp Eye requires you to aim down sights, and kill enemies. So again, like I said, that's why it's important to feather the trigger and sort of like aim down sights, go back, aim down sights, go back, to engage the claymore effect, but also to try and dip into this, you know, as much as possible. Lastly, we have Flame Grasper, which says enables absorption of 2 additional targets. That means every time when you press Feed the Flames, and there's 3 enemies available, you will, you know, pardon the word, suck from 3 enemies. Then when we go over to the skills, I think it's pretty clear what we're using. So we're using Thermal Bomb as mentioned, we're using Feed the Flames, and we're using Volcanic Rounds. Now, one important thing to notice about Volcanic Rounds that I don't know or don't see a lot of people, you know, that know about it or play around that is Volcanic Rounds is funny in the way that you don't actually have to hit the enemies with the Volcanic Rounds. So that's what makes this unique to the other bullet skills, because with Volcanic Rounds, something that's hiding behind cover, you can still hit it by just firing the rounds right over their heads and it'll still set them on fire. And that'll actually make them pop out of cover and you can hit them. So just a little side note in case you never noticed that. When we get over to the class tree, of course we're going top tree because we want to accentuate first of all our firepower damage, and secondly we want to do as much as possible damage to stuff that is ashen, and we want to get as many bonuses as possible to our firepower damage. So we're picking up nodes along the way to increase weapon damage. We're definitely getting weapon life leech here. And you'll see that we pick up nodes that make us deal more weapon damage to stuff that's marked. What this means is pyromancers work this way. Any enemy that is affected by a skill of a pyromancer is considered marked. That means that when they die, you get a percentage of life back, because that is how the pyromancer's healing, you know, ability works. And if you want to understand this more, you can just hover over the card here and it explains it quite well, or probably better than I am. But the point is that by picking up these nodes, you deal additional damage to stuff that's marked, and it's quite considerable once you pick up a bunch of these nodes, and very noticeable. We pick up Assault Master because we are using an LMG, so even if you for some reason don't end up going for the Damascus offering, you use some kind of, you know, assault rifle, maybe a submachine gun, maybe a double gun, something like that, then this is still a good one to pick up because you get 20% additional damage with that. Then we're just picking up armor piercing and additional damage to ash along the way. Another big node that we pick up, and this drives a lot of the CC of this build, is, as I've mentioned, Incinerate. This says that the minute the burn ends on an enemy, it turns to ash. Fantastic. The next one over here also makes the ash last longer. So there's a bunch of these here. Curse of Pompeii, there's 2 of them. Both of those make the ash last 30% longer. Now, ash lasts about between 4 to 5 seconds depending on the resistance that the mob has. So this basically makes it last closer to 6 to 7 to 8 seconds, which is huge. Then we're just continuing on down the line here, picking up standard damage nodes, everything like that. The next big one that we pick up is Ashes to Ashes. This says every time ash is afflicted on an enemy, it also gets vulnerable. Vulnerable means that enemies take additional damage as well. So this is just another you know, debuff that you're putting on stuff. The next one, the second last major node that we pick up is Hurt Twice as Long. This increases your damage to elites by 10%, but reduces their damage to you by 10%. Then you can't see it here because my face is in the way, but we pick up both of these nodes here. So as you can see where my mouse is hovering, we pick up Trial of the Ashes as well as Marble Orchard. Jesus, Orchard. Okay. And then, of course, last but not least, we pick up Burning Situation, which says that when you activate immobilized skills, and the only immobilized skills that we use with this is Feed the Flames, your weapon damage increases to 45% for 10 seconds by 45%. Now, you'll notice something, and that is that our cooldowns for this are exceptionally low. Volcanic rounds, we don't worry about the cooldown because we're going to be keeping that up the entire time. But both our Thermal Bomb and our Feed the Flames hover around 10 seconds. That means that by correctly playing around with Feed the Flames, you can keep this 45% additional weapon damage up almost indefinitely, as long as you're in fights. So that's it for the build, guys. I mean, first and foremost, this definitely requires a lot more to set up. The fact that you have to use a different classes, you know, class armor, legendary armor, just to sort of build around this. And so then it'll probably take you a little bit longer to put this together. But let me know in the comments down below if you have something similar to this, if you've tried this, if it piques your interest, what you think about it, and more specifically, if you think it rocks as much as I do. But that's basically it. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. It is just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, a great afternoon, and a super awesome evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.